Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening at our school, and I think you need to hear about this. Like, seriously weird stuff that's making parents keep their kids home and teachers act all nervous when they think we're not looking. So last Tuesday, right after Ms. Harrison's history class, parents all over our district started getting these phone calls. Anonymous calls telling them, "Don't send your child to school tomorrow." That's it. Just that one sentence, and then whoever was calling would hang up. My mom got one. Tommy Rodriguez's mom got one. Even Principal Hayes' neighbor got one about her kid who goes to the elementary school. At first, everyone thought it was just some prank. You know how high schoolers can be sometimes. But then more calls came. And more. By Wednesday morning, like 30% of students were absent. The office was going crazy trying to figure out what was happening. Mrs. Henderson, who's been the secretary here forever, told me she'd never seen anything like it in 23 years of working at Millbrook. That's when I knew I had to investigate. I mean, this is exactly the kind of story the school newspaper should be covering, right? Something that's actually affecting our school instead of just writing about the cafeteria serving mystery meat again. Plus, I was really curious about who would make calls like that and why. It felt like there was a real story here. I started by interviewing some of the parents who got calls. Mrs. Rodriguez was really nice about talking to me. She said the voice sounded young, maybe like a teenager, but there was something wrong with it. It was too perfect, she told me. Like someone reading from a script, but not quite right. And Jamie, honey, the thing that really bothered me was that they knew Tommy's name. They said, "Don't send Tommy to school tomorrow. Not just your child. How would some random person know my son's name?" That gave me chills, but I kept investigating. I talked to more parents and they all said the same thing. The caller knew their kid's name. Every single time. Sarah June's mom said the voice asked specifically about Sarah. Marcus Thompson's dad said they mentioned Marcus by name. It wasn't just a general warning, it was personal. The weird thing was, when I tried to ask the principal about it, she seemed really scattered. Principal Hayes is usually super organized, always checking her watch and talking about schedules and procedures. But when I asked about the calls, she just stared at me for a few seconds and then said, "What calls?" "Oh, those calls. Yes, we're handling it through proper channels." And then she walked away really fast, like she was late for something important. But here's where it gets really strange. I started noticing that even though lots of kids were absent, the ones who did come to school were acting different. Not all of them, but some. Like they were more focused on following the rules than usual. They'd sit up straighter in class, raise their hands at exactly the right time, and they all seemed to be paying really close attention to the announcements that come over the PA system. Speaking of announcements, that's when I realized something else was off. I've been going to this school for 2 years now, and I know the schedule pretty well. But lately, the announcements have been weird. They happen at the right times, but sometimes they repeat. Not exactly the same words, but the same information, like all students report to homeroom would be announced at 8:15, which is normal. But then at 8:17, it would be, students should proceed to homeroom period, same thing, just said differently, and the bell schedule. Oh man, the bell schedule has been driving me crazy. It's supposed to ring at specific times, 8:15 for homeroom, 8:30 for first period, stuff like that. But I started timing it with my phone, and sometimes it rings a few seconds early or late. Not by much, but enough that I noticed. When I asked Mr. Peterson about it, he just said, "Time is relative, Jamie. What matters is that we maintain our routine." That's when I decided to really dig into this story. I started carrying around my digital recorder. You know, the one I use for interviews for the school paper. I figured if weird stuff was happening, I should document it. And let me tell you, I'm glad I did, because what I recorded over the next few days was absolutely insane. First, I interviewed Tommy Rodriguez from the elementary school. He's only 8, but he's really smart, and he notices things. Tommy told me something that made my stomach drop. He said, "Jamie, There's a new kid in my class. He sits in the back and he always smiles, but Mrs. Garcia acts like he's not there. Like, she'll count heads for attendance and count right past him, but there's definitely a kid sitting there. I asked Tommy to describe this new kid, and he said, he's got brown hair, and he's wearing a blue shirt. But Jamie, here's the really weird part. He's in my math class too, in my reading class. And I saw him in the cafeteria at lunch sitting with the 5th graders. How can one kid be in all those places? That's when I knew this wasn't just about mysterious phone calls anymore. I started asking other students about new kids, and the stories I heard were unbelievable. Sarah June from my grade told me about a boy who sits in the back of her science class. He's always smiling, she said. Like, always. Even when Mr. Rodriguez is talking about dissecting frogs or whatever. And get this, I asked Jessica, who sits next to him, what his name is, and she looked at me like I was crazy. She said there's nobody sitting there. But the really scary part was when I talked to Marcus Thompson, who's in high school. He told me he's been seeing the same kid in his classes for weeks now. Jamie, I swear this kid is in my English class, my history class, my math class, every single one, and he never talks, never raises his hand, but he's always writing in this notebook. The teachers never call on him, never even look at him. It's like he's invisible to them, but not to us. I decided I had to see this for myself, so I started paying attention during my classes, looking for anyone who might be this mysterious new kid. And then, during 3rd period math, I saw him. He was sitting in the back corner, exactly like everyone described. Brown hair, blue shirt, and this smile that never went away. He was writing in a notebook, and every few minutes he'd look up and scan the room like he was looking for something. The creepiest part was that Mrs. Patterson, our math teacher, completely ignored him. She was taking attendance, and she counted every single student in the room except him. When she got to his row, she just skipped right over him like he wasn't there. But he was there. I could see him clear as day. I tried to get closer to see what he was writing, but every time I looked in his direction, he'd look up and make eye contact with me. And that smile. It wasn't a mean smile or a scary smile exactly, but it was wrong. Like he was happy about something that shouldn't make someone happy. After class, I followed him out into the hallway. I wanted to talk to him, find out who he was and why teachers couldn't see him. But when I got to the hallway, he was gone. Just vanished. I asked other students if they'd seen where he went, but they all said they hadn't seen anyone matching his description. That's when I started recording everything. I'd turn on my recorder at the beginning of each class and just let it run. And what I caught on those recordings still gives me nightmares. In the background of my regular class recordings, you can hear this voice. It's really quiet, like someone whispering. But if you turn the volume up, you can make out words. The voice says things like, the pattern must continue, and routine makes us strong, and tests are coming soon. But here's the thing. When I play these recordings back, I can't remember hearing any of those whispers during class. It's like they're only there on the recording, not in real life. I showed these recordings to Sarah, and she got really freaked out. She said, Jamie, this is way beyond normal weird stuff. This is like supernatural weird. And she's right. I've been trying to find logical explanations for everything, but there aren't any. Anonymous callers who know kids' names, a student who's invisible to teachers, voices on recordings that nobody heard. None of it makes sense, but it gets worse. Remember how I said some students were acting different? Well, more and more kids are starting to act that way. They're becoming obsessed with following the rules, with being on time, with doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They sit perfectly still in class, they never goof off, and they all seem to be listening really carefully to those weird announcements. I tried to talk to some of these kids to ask them if they'd noticed anything strange, but they just stared at me with these blank expressions and said things like, everything is normal, Jamie, or we should focus on our studies. It's like they're turning into robots or something. Yesterday, I finally got up the courage to stay after class and try to talk to the new kid directly. I waited until everyone else had left Mrs. Patterson's math class, and there he was, still sitting in the back corner, still writing in his notebook. I walked up to him and said, Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm a reporter for the school newspaper. Can I ask you some questions? He looked up at me with that constant smile, and for a second, I thought he wasn't going to respond. But then, he nodded just once. I asked him what his name was, and he opened his mouth like he was going to answer, but no sound came out. He tried again, and this time I heard the faintest whisper, "Help me." And then, just as I was about to ask him more questions, the bell rang. But it wasn't the regular bell, it was longer, deeper, and it seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. The new kid's smile faltered for just a second, and I could see something in his eyes that looked like fear. Pure, desperate fear. When the bell stopped, his smile was back, but he was shaking his head slightly. He closed his notebook and stood up, and as he walked past me toward the door, I heard him whisper, "Don't trust the routine." I tried to follow him again, but this time when I got to the hallway, not only was he gone, but the hallway was completely empty. No other students, no teachers, nobody. It was like the whole school had suddenly become deserted. I could hear the normal sounds of classes going on behind the closed doors, but the hallways were like a ghost town. I started walking toward the main office, but something was wrong with the hallway. It seemed longer than usual, and the fluorescent lights were flickering in this weird pattern. Not randomly. There was definitely a rhythm to it. And as I walked, I kept hearing that whispered voice from my recordings. But this time it was all around me, like it was coming from the walls themselves. "Tests are coming," it whispered. "The pattern must be preserved. Routine makes us strong." I just ran straight to the newspaper office and locked the door behind me. I sat there for like 20 minutes trying to figure out what was happening to our school. And that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. The phone calls warning parents to keep their kids home. What if they weren't pranks? What if someone was trying to protect us from something? What if staying home really was the safe thing to do? I started thinking about everything I'd observed. The kids who were absent seemed fine when they came back, but the kids who stayed in school, especially the ones who were acting strange, they were all following the routine more and more perfectly, like they were being trained or programmed or something. And the new kid, what if he wasn't part of whatever was happening? What if he was trying to warn us? He did say "help me," and "don't trust the routine." Maybe he's trapped somehow, and he's trying to get someone to notice what's really going on. I've been investigating this for a week now, and I'm more confused and scared than when I started. But I know one thing for sure. Something is seriously wrong at Millbrook Middle School. And whatever it is, it's getting stronger. More kids are acting strange every day, the announcements are getting weirder, and that new kid is showing up in more and more classes. I don't know what those anonymous callers were trying to protect us from, but I think they were right. I think there are days when we shouldn't go to school. Days when staying home is the safest thing we can do. If you're listening to this and you're a student at Millbrook or any of the other schools in our district, pay attention to what's happening around you. Notice if there are kids in your classes that teachers don't seem to see. Listen carefully to the announcements and the bell schedule. And if you get a phone call telling you not to go to school tomorrow, maybe you should listen. I'm going to keep investigating this story because I think our school newspaper has a responsibility to report on what's really happening, even if the adults don't want to hear it. But I'm also going to be really careful, because I think whatever is happening at our school, it's not done yet. And I think the new kid was trying to warn me about something that's coming. This is Jamie Parker, reporting for the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. Stay safe, and remember, if something feels wrong, it probably is.